judge or a jury, and they said, I don't want to appeal anymore. I want my sentence to be carried out on me. Other than that, all the rest of them, and we have one of the largest death rows in the country, all the people that are on the death row just sit and wait for their appeals to be exhausted, and it is, quite frankly, an exhausting process. So you're right, when a person gets sentenced to life in prison, they're going to die in prison. Yeah.
When someone gets sentenced to death, how do you execute them?
In Pennsylvania, the approved method, and there is only one, is by lethal injection. They're given what's called a cocktail of various drugs. One will put you to sleep, one will effectively cause you to not feel any pain, and the other one will cause you to stop. It will stop your life, essentially. Yes?
Do any states still use the electric chair?
I'm not sure. I only know about Pennsylvania because that's the only state I have to be concerned with. Who has the next question? How are we doing? Are we doing okay?
We're doing great.
Okay, we're rolling through. All right, good. I want to give everybody a chance. Yeah.
Have you ever had a mistrial?
You know what? I've been real close, but I never have had a mistrial. And it's funny because mistrials are easier to have occur than you would believe, but not as easy as TV and the movies would have you believe. There are a lot of written and unwritten rules as to what you can do and what you can say during a trial and what your witnesses can do and say during a trial. But I've been very fortunate in that even though I've had plenty of defense attorneys ask for a mistrial, which essentially means the trial stops in the middle, and if the state is lucky, the Commonwealth is lucky, we get a do-over. We get to do a retrial. But I've successfully been able to fend those off, and I've always been able to complete my trials. Now, I have had 2 hung juries where the trial was complete. We got all the evidence in, the case went to the jury, but then the jury couldn't decide on a verdict whether the person was guilty or not guilty. And in those cases, even though the case went all the way to the end, a mistrial was declared, and those people were retried. In one case, the defendant accepted a plea offer. It was a very minor case of theft of a license plate. And in another case, it was a case of a rape, and the guy was retried a 4th time, not by me, but he was found guilty, and he was resentenced to a great long time in jail. So those were my 2 experiences with mistrial situations. Yeah.
How long was the guy sent to jail for the first thing?
I think 35 years in jail. This was in New Jersey. This was when I worked in New Jersey. It was a decent sentence. Obviously, I'd like to see him sentenced for longer, but my personal opinion doesn't matter.
My name's Olivia, and what was your most famous case?
That's a great question. I gave this question a lot of thought. I don't really have a case that gained a lot of notoriety, but I can just tell you that very recently I've been involved in reviving an investigation into a 35-year-old murder case where the case sat up on a shelf after years and years because we never could solve it. It occurred in 1977. And because of a unique relationship that we have with the newspapers, we allowed the newspaper reporters to investigate it for us. They had an interest. And the case was actually resulted in a great series of articles called The Girl on the Hill. And if you check it out, it's on phillybirds.com. The articles are very well written. And as a result of it, the essence of it is a young lady who lived down in Bristol in Levittown area was last seen down there leaving a bar, and then she ultimately was found close by here on Buckingham Mountain, and she was murdered. And we always had a suspect, but we never could pin it on this guy. And so as a result of the notoriety, the recent notoriety that the press got this case, we revived our investigation of it because we now have access to forensic investigative tools that we never had back in 1977. We could test for DNA, we could test certain blood samples and see if they match a suspect. So that case, actually, as a result of those stories, we've now revived the investigation, and that story was picked up by Fox News, which went all across the country just because it was such an old case. I wish I could tell you we had a result, but we don't have a result yet. But I'm really hopeful that as a result of the forensic investigation, we'll be able to finally solve that case.
Janice?
Have criminals ever escaped from the courthouse?
They don't really escape per se. Security is pretty tight, and if you're, Ms. Mitzner, was this the class that came up to the courthouse? Were these some of the people that came up?
No, they weren't.
Okay.
No.
What you'll see if you ever get a chance to go up to the courthouse.
We will be there May 2 for Law Day.
Okay, for Law Day. You'll certainly see this. You'll see a lot of deputy sheriffs. You'll see a lot of security, and you'll see at least the people that are determined to be a flight risk or serious offenders will all be handcuffed. Not only will they be handcuffed, most of them will be handcuffed to each other, and in a way that makes it very difficult for them to escape. What does happen sometimes is a person that's free, that's out on bail, that's at liberty, might decide not to show up or might decide not to come back. And that happens sometimes. But actual escapes are very rare, thankfully. And that's because our sheriffs and our security and our police forces do a really good job.
Riley?
Wait, go ahead.
Has it ever happened?
I'm sure it has happened, but I can't even think of a time. And I've been doing this a long time.
My name is Riley, and what was your most interesting or horrific case?
The case that I tend to remember the most, and it's really because it was very sad, is a case in which we got a call. Our Child Protective Services got a call from a neighbor. This was while I was up in Lehigh County in Slady, which is coal country eventually, where there was a complaint about suspected little kids living in an apartment, and they weren't being cared for. So the police stormed into the apartment, and they did find not only one little girl living in there, but a young lady that was only about 15, another young lady that was about 19, and this guy that was ultimately charged for abusing all of these people. And as it turns out, this guy not only had impregnated this 15-year-old, but even when she was younger, they had a baby together. And that little baby Michael, was gone. And so we put out a massive hunt for baby Michael, and we never could find him. And we ultimately figured out from speaking with the people involved that baby Michael died because he was not well cared for. So we charged and prosecuted that defendant, Miguel Figueroa, and we had the help of the 15-year-old and the 19-year-old. But I'll never forget it. It was by the Lehigh River, and they had set up lights just like this, and they had all kinds of digging tools, and they dug day and night by the banks of the river looking for baby Michael. We had cadaver dogs that are trained to find cadavers in the ground, and we never could find him. But we did prosecute Miguel Figueroa for that. He was convicted, and he got a real good long sentence. But that was a case that really stayed with me and stayed near and dear to my heart. I will never forget baby Michael.
Matthew?
My name is Matthew Hanna, and what is the longest trial you worked on?
The good news is criminal trials are usually not as long as civil trials. Just to give you some perspective, some trials can be less than a day long. But if you're really involved in a serious case, like a murder case, especially one where you might be seeking the death penalty, in which it even takes a week or two to pick a jury, just to pick a jury. You haven't even started the case yet. A case can take a month or more. And the longest case that I ever prosecuted took 6 weeks. And I've had a couple that have taken over a month, but the longest one I ever prosecuted was 6 weeks. And the way that you have to think about it is, it's like if you're all running a race, and you know the race is long. It's not how you start out. It's not who's in front at the beginning. It's who's in front at the end. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So I remember just going through that in my mind and thinking, oh my gosh, I had such a bad day today. I didn't do well. My witnesses didn't do well. The case isn't going great. But you always have to get back, gather your reserves and focus on the next day and be ready to fight again the next day.
You start proving the person innocent or guilty.
In my instance, always guilty. And it's interesting that you say that, because the only person that has to prove anything in a criminal trial in the United States is me and people like me. The defendant never has to prove a thing. In fact, the defendant doesn't have to say a word. The defense attorney doesn't have to say a word. The defendant doesn't have to get on the stand and defend himself. In fact, and I've had this happen, a defendant doesn't even have to be there, and he can still be put on trial. I had a guy once, he started out participating in the case. He didn't like how it was going, so he refused to come back after lunch, and he stayed in the holding cell, and the judge made sure he didn't want to participate. He said, yes, I don't want to. So we did the rest of the trial without him, and we still convicted him. But so you understand, nobody needs to prove their innocence. We are only obligated to prove whether he's guilty, and if we fail in that burden, he must be found not guilty. And I say he, it could be a she as well. Yeah.
Because if you didn't want to go to the trial, would that be like a little hint that he was guilty?
It could be, but you're not allowed to consider that. And in fact, the judge will tell the jury, the fact that he's not present is not a fact that you can consider in deciding whether we've met our burden of proof. The burden is always on us. And the judge will also tell the jury, the fact that he decides not to testify or that he offers no evidence may not be considered against him in deciding whether the state, the Commonwealth, has met its burden of proof. The burden is always over here.
Chad?
Hi, my name's Chad. Have you ever been charged with contempt?
Contempt of court? No, I've been, no. It's the easy answer. I've been admonished a few times, and the way the lore goes, if you think you're going to be or you're about to be, you start to take off your watch and your jewelry and empty your pockets, and you give it to your buddy who's also in the DA's office with you. Because if you're going to be found in contempt, theoretically you could be locked up and sent to jail. I don't always agree with the judges that I practice in front of, but I always try to be very deferential and respectful. And I think that if you treat them with professionalism, they will respect you when you argue passionately for your side. The other thing is I always try to be prepared. I think that if you're prepared, they appreciate that, and they tend to trust you. I liken it to a home game. If you play sports, and you look like you do, when you're in a home game, even though the playing field is level for both teams, the home team knows gets the home field advantage and knows the court the best, right? Well, that's the way that I try to play it. I always play very fair. I always try my cases very fairly. But I know all the judges. I know the judges, and they know what they can expect of me. So that's a long-winded way of saying I've never been held in contempt, even though I am very vocal and passionate when I'm arguing my position.